The Arabian Sea is the kind of water that demands respect before it offers anything else. It is deep, averaging more than 3,000 meters across its central basin. Warm at the surface, thermally complex at depth, and acoustically layered in ways that make submarine detection one of the most technically demanding disciplines in naval warfare. The thermocline, the boundary layer where warmer surface water meets the colder, denser water beneath, acts as an acoustic mirror, reflecting sonar pulses upward and creating shadow zones below where a submarine can sit in effective invisibility, its acoustic signature masked by the thermal gradient above it. This is not theory. This is physics. And the navies that operate in the Arabian Sea, the ones that take the acoustic environment seriously and train their people to understand it, use that physics. The ones that do not pay the price. Iran's submarine program has been dismissed, underestimated, and occasionally mocked in Western analytical circles for the better part of 2 decades. The critique is not without basis. Iran's older submarine fleet, the Russian-built Kilo class, the domestically produced Qadir midget submarines designed for shallow coastal operations in the Persian Gulf, has real operational limitations when measured against the blue water ASW capability that the United States Navy has refined since the Second World War. But the Fateh class is a different calculation. The Fateh is a medium-range submarine, approximately 500 tons submerged displacement, built in Iran over a decade of incremental development that incorporated lessons from the Kilo program, from Chinese technical cooperation, and from the particular operational requirement of a navy that knows it cannot compete in a symmetrical fight and has accordingly invested in asymmetry. The Fateh carries the JASC-2 anti-ship torpedo, a domestically developed weapon with guidance characteristics that Western analysts assess as capable. It is quieter than its predecessors. It is designed specifically for the acoustic environment of the northwestern Arabian Sea and the Gulf of Oman, the waters it was built to hunt in. And it had been hunting. It was a Thursday. The time was 22:41 local. Deep night, the sky over the Arabian Sea, brilliant with stars uncontaminated by any light source within 200 miles. The surface running with a low, lazy swell that left the water essentially flat. An Arleigh Burke class guided missile destroyer was transiting southeast through international waters, approximately 160 nautical miles south of the Pakistani coastline, conducting an independent transit to join a carrier strike group operating further south. She was not accompanied by any surface escort. She was not supported by airborne ASW assets in her immediate area. She was, in the relevant operational sense, alone, a single surface combatant moving through deep water at 18 knots on a course that had been predictable for the past 4 hours. In the destroyer's Combat Information Center, the watch had been running at the standard nighttime readiness level when the first datum appeared. It came not from the ship's own sensors, but from the SOSUS network, the sound surveillance system, the hydrophone array infrastructure that the United States Navy has maintained across the ocean floors of the world's strategic waterways since the Cold War, continuously upgraded, continuously expanding the deep listening architecture that hears things that nothing on the surface can hear. The SOSUS datum, relayed through the Naval Communications Network, arrived at 2237 as a possible subsurface contact bearing northwest, confidence level moderate, classification tentative Fateh class. Range uncertain, a possible Fateh class submarine. Northwest bearing. The destroyer's northwest bearing placed the datum somewhere in the arc between the Gulf of Oman exit and the approaches to the Pakistani coastal shelf. If the classification was correct, and SOSUS confidence levels at the moderate tier had a historical accuracy rate that the ASW coordinators knew precisely, then Fateh was operating in approximately the same water as an American destroyer that had been on a predictable course for 4 hours. The watch officer's voice on the internal circuit was even and quiet. Captain, CIC, SOSUS datum, possible Fateh class contact, bearing northwest. Confidence moderate. Request your presence. The captain arrived in 3 minutes. She read the SOSUS message, looked at the tactical display, and ran the geometry in her mind. If the SOSUS datum was accurate, and if the Fateh was on a course intended to intercept the destroyer's current track, the contact would close to engagement range within a window that the mathematics made uncomfortably tight. 18 knots on the destroyer's part, unknown speed and course on the submarine's part, an acoustic environment that, at this hour and in this location, favored the submarine. The Arabian Sea's thermal structure in late autumn created exactly the kind of layered shadow zones that a competent submarine crew would exploit. She looked at the surface search radar. Clear. Nothing within 40 miles. Whatever was out there was beneath the surface. All right, she said. What ASW assets do we have available? The 2 SH-60B Seahawks on the flight deck, ma'am. Alert 30. No P-8 within operational range. Closest asset is 4 hours out. Alert 30 is too long. Bring them to Alert 5 now. She turned to the sonar supervisor. What does our hull-mounted sonar show? Clean trace on the bearing, ma'am. Thermal layer at 90 meters. Anything below that layer is in the shadow. The shadow. That was the problem and the challenge simultaneously. The destroyer's SQS-53 hull-mounted sonar was a powerful system, one of the best active sonar suites in the world. But its physics were the same physics that governed every other sonar operating in this water. The thermal layer at 90 meters was refracting the sonar pulses upward, leaving the water below it acoustically dark to anything operating from the surface. A Fateh, sitting at 120 meters below the thermocline, inside the shadow zone, could be within 5 nautical miles of the destroyer and not show on the hull-mounted sonar in passive mode. Active sonar would change that. A full-power active pulse from the SQS-53 would punch through the thermocline and illuminate anything in the shadow zone. But active sonar tells the submarine everything it needs to know: the direction of the threat, the range, the facts of its detection. An active sonar ping is the loudest announcement a surface ship can make to a submarine below it. If the Fateh was out there and had not yet identified the destroyer as its specific target, going active might change that situation in an unhelpful direction. The captain understood this calculus without needing it explained. Passive sonar only for now. I want the narrowband analysis running on every bearing. Pull every tonal you can find. She looked at the electronic warfare officer. What is our emission signature right now? Standard transit posture, ma'am. Navigation radar active, communication systems nominal, reduce to minimum. Kill the navigation radar. We will use the Seahawk for surface search." She paused. "And alter course. I want a 30-degree course change to port. Reduce speed to 12 knots. Do it now." No announcement. This was a counter-detection maneuver, a change in the destroyer's acoustic signature and movement pattern designed to complicate the picture for any submarine that had been tracking the surface ship by its propulsion noise and course prediction. A submarine tracking a surface ship at 18 knots on a steady course has a relatively straightforward targeting solution. A surface ship that changes course and speed without warning becomes a more complex problem. At sea, distance is language. And right now, the destroyer was trying to speak less clearly. The two MH-60R Seahawks were airborne at 2254, climbing into the Arabian Sea night and proceeding northwest on the bearing of the SOSUS datum. Each helicopter carried a full load of sonobuoys, active and passive, and a Mark 54 lightweight torpedo. The crews had been briefed as they walked to their aircraft. Possible Fateh contact, bearing northwest, thermocline at 90 meters, shadow zone below. Deploy passive sonobuoys first. Build an acoustic picture. Do not go active until ordered. The geometry of the search was precise. The Seahawk crews dropped their first passive sonobuoy pattern at 2306, placing the buoys in a spread that covered the most probable position area for the contact given the SOSUS datum time, the estimated contact speed range, and the acoustic propagation characteristics of the water. In the CIC, the sonobuoy data began feeding into the acoustic analysis system as each buoy settled and began listening. For 4 minutes, the system processed in silence. The sonar operators watched their displays. Nobody said anything. At 2310, the first tonal appeared. It was faint, barely above the ambient noise level, the kind of trace that a less experienced operator might dismiss as biologic or distant shipping noise. The sonar supervisor looked at it for 20 seconds before he spoke. Possible contact, buoy 4. Bearing 265 from buoy 4. Tonal frequency consistent with Fateh-class propulsion harmonic. Low confidence, but it was there. The trace was on the display, and it was real, and it was in the right frequency band, and it was below the thermocline on a bearing from buoy 4 that was consistent with the SOSUS datum's northwest placement. The captain looked at the trace. She looked at the buoy 4 position on the tactical display. She looked at the bearing line extending southwest from buoy 4 toward the estimated contact position. Drop a second pattern around buoy 4. Tighten the spread. I want cross bearings. The Seahawk pilot executed the new buoy pattern within 3 minutes, dropping 4 additional passive buoys in a geometry designed to give the acoustic analysis system bearing lines from multiple sensors, cross bearings that, when the system triangulated them, would produce a position estimate rather than just a bearing. In ASW, the difference between a bearing and a position is the difference between knowing a submarine is somewhere in a wedge of ocean and knowing it is in a specific place within that wedge. Position is what enables prosecution. Position is what enables a torpedo to be placed correctly. At 2318, the cross bearings resolved. The acoustic analysis system processed the data from 3 buoys simultaneously and produced an estimated contact position, not confirmed, not positive, but a geometric intersection of 3 bearing lines that placed the contact at approximately 8 nautical miles from the destroyer's current position. Bearing 283, depth estimated below 90 meters, course northeast at an estimated 5 to 7 knots, northeast, course northeast at 5 to 7 knots. The destroyer had altered course to port 12 minutes ago. If the contact's course had been established before that alteration, if it had been tracking the destroyer's original course, then its northeast heading was no longer an intercept course. The course change had worked. The Fateh, if that was what it was now heading toward where the destroyer had been, not where it was. In the CIC, the tactical picture held that geometry for a moment that felt longer than it was. The estimated contact position, the bearing lines, the destroyer's current position after its course, and speed change. The gap between where the contact was going and where the destroyer now was. At 23:21, the captain made the decision that the situation required. Go active on buoy 4, single pulse, max power. The active sonobuoy transmitted a single high-power acoustic pulse at 23:22. The return came back in 4.3 seconds. A clean, hard reflection from a metallic object at 112 meters depth, range 4,800 yards from buoy 4, bearing consistent with the estimated position. The contact was confirmed. The position was precise. Below the thermocline, in the shadow zone, where the destroyer's own hull sonar could not reach, a submarine was at 112 meters, 4,800 yards from the last sonobuoy, and it now knew with absolute certainty that it had been found. What followed in the next 90 seconds was the operational consequence of that knowledge. The passive sonobuoys registered an immediate increase in radiated noise from the contact bearing, the acoustic signature of a submarine increasing speed quickly, a maneuver that produces cavitation and turbulence that is acoustically loud and directionally unmistakable. The contact was accelerating. The cross-bearing solution updated, course shifting from northeast to southwest, away from the destroyer, away from the sonobuoy pattern, toward deeper water and the anonymity of distance it was running. In the CIC, the sonar supervisor reported the contact's maneuver in the flat, precise language of a professional who has trained for this moment. Contact is accelerating, bearing shifting south. Estimated speed increased to 15 knots. Course estimate now 210. The captain watched the contact track update. Southwest at 15 knots. Away. The torpedo solution that the tactical system had been building since the active confirmation was valid. The geometry, the range, the depth were all within parameters. The Mark 54 could reach that contact. The crew knew it could reach that contact. The torpedo remained on the Seahawk's pylons. Log the contact track, the captain said. Continue passive prosecution as long as we have it. I want the track continuous. Do not lose it. She turned to the communications officer. Flash traffic to 5th Fleet and NavCent. Full ASW contact report. SOSUS datum time. Sonobuoy pattern, active confirmation, contact position, course, and speed. I want that message transmitted in the next 4 minutes. She turned back to the display. The contact track was opening, the range increasing as the Fateh pushed southwest at 15 knots, its noise signature now elevated enough for the passive sonobuoys to track it clearly. It was making the ASW problem easier by running fast, because a fast submarine is a loud submarine, and a loud submarine is a tracked submarine. The Seahawks maintained the prosecution for another 38 minutes, following the contact south until it slowed, went deep, and its acoustic signature faded below the detection threshold of the passive buoys. By 0004, the contact had been lost to prosecution, not because it had escaped, but because it had gone deep into water that required a different sensor geometry to cover, and the Seahawks were at the limits of their ordnance load in terms of buoys available. The contact had been tracked for 43 minutes from first tonal to loss of prosecution. Its position, course, speed, and depth at the moment of active confirmation were precisely known, precisely recorded, and already on their way to Fifth Fleet intelligence. The destroyer resumed its original course and speed at 0011, continuing its transit southeast. The Arabian Sea was still flat, still brilliant with stars, still deep and warm and acoustically complex. Everything it had been at 2241. What had changed was the record. Somewhere in the classified databases that intelligence analysts would access in the coming days, the acoustic signature of a Fateh-class submarine operating in the northwestern Arabian Sea had been captured with a fidelity that would make future encounters less uncertain. The frequency of its propulsion harmonics, the precise acoustic behavior of its hull under acceleration, the depth at which it chose to operate in this water temperature and salinity profile. Each of these data points was a piece of knowledge that made the next encounter less ambiguous and the acoustic picture more complete. That is how ASW campaigns are won, not in single dramatic moments, but in the patient accumulation of knowledge applied correctly, with discipline and precision, in the darkness beneath the surface of seas that most people never think about, and that navies can never afford to neglect. The Arabian Sea does not announce its threats. It holds them in shadow zones below thermoclines, in water so deep and dark that the concept of visibility becomes meaningless. What finds a submarine in that environment is not eyesight or luck. It is understanding. Understanding of the acoustic physics, understanding of the adversary's doctrine and behavior, understanding built from training and intelligence, and the willingness to operate in the most demanding conditions naval warfare produces. On this Thursday night, that understanding had been present, precise, and entirely sufficient. The Fateh had found a destroyer it thought it could approach unseen, in water it had been built to operate in at night, in conditions that should have favored the hunter. Instead, it found itself hunted, located, confirmed, and prosecuted by a surface ship that had reduced its emissions, changed its course at precisely the right moment, and put helicopters in the air with sonobuoys that built an acoustic picture from nothing in 37 minutes. Modern anti-submarine warfare is not glamorous. It does not make headlines. The public does not see it, cannot see it, has no frame of reference for the patience and technical precision it demands. But it is the foundation of everything else that happens at sea, because a navy that cannot protect its surface ships from submarines operating beneath them, has no surface fleet in any real operational sense. It has targets. On this night, in this water, the destroyer was not a target. It was a hunter that had allowed itself to appear hunted, waited for the precise moment when the adversary's position was known with certainty, and then demonstrated quietly, professionally, and completely that the shadow zone is not as dark as it looks to those who have not learned to listen.